Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me here today. My name is Sarah Michehl, and I am the Community Engagement Specialist with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. And today we're going to be talking about the wonderful world of native plant gardening and design. A little background on me: my degree is in ecology. My professional background is in environmental education, and I've been making lots of mistakes with native plant gardening in my own yard for the last 12 years or so, but love it a lot. And I just want to share some tips and tricks that I've learned from people that are way more experienced than I am, and friends, and just introduce you into the wonderful world of native plants. So to begin with, I want to talk to you about who the Land Conservancy of McHenry County is. We are located in northern Illinois, about an hour outside of Chicago. We are a nonprofit land trust. We've been around since 1991. Basically, what we like to do is work with people to preserve land here in McHenry County. And we do that in a variety of ways. We work with people who maybe want to put a conservation easement on their property. That means that they want to make sure that that land is preserved forever with certain standards put on it. So we work with the landowner to do that. We do tons of different education classes on all different topics on what private landowners can do on their own properties, along with municipalities too, to incorporate sound ecological principles into their properties. We do spring and a fall native tree, shrub, plant sale, some rain barrels and composters too in the spring. All of that can be found on our website at conservancy.org. We do tons of different restoration projects on our sites, as well as some municipal owned sites and private conservation easements all around the county. As of today, we have preserved just over 2,500 acres of land around the county through people who have put conservation easements on their property, along with us outright fundraising to purchase and preserve land. So today, what we're going to be talking about are native plants and gardening and how to do that. And I can tell you that I have heard so many times people say things like, oh, native plant garden, you mean a weed patch? So unfortunately, they have gotten sometimes a negative reputation associated with them. So I want to share some tips and tricks on how to avoid that. And there's a native plant garden appropriate for any neighborhood. I don't care if you've got 60 acres out in a rural area, or if you live in a very traditional suburban neighborhood that has a homeowners association. So we're going to go over some of that stuff today. Okay, so let's start with what exactly is a native plant. I'm just going to assume that you guys don't know anything, and we're going to start at the very beginning. So a native plant is a plant that has been in a certain region for thousands of years without human intervention. So it's been growing there, and these plants have developed a community in and amongst each other. Their roots have a nutrient exchange system where they actually support each other, along with all of the bacteria and fungi and all kinds of stuff in the soil. They all support each other. As opposed to a non-native plant is a plant that has been brought in, usually by people, and that particular species has not developed a relationship with the plants of the local region. So you can see in this slide here, we have a couple different examples of native plants to our area here in the Midwest. We've got the mayapple up on the top of the screen there, a really neat little heart shade oak savanna wildflower, stands, I don't know, around 1 foot tall, something like that. And then down on the bottom, it's a carpet of Pennsylvania sedge, which you're probably going to hear me spaz about throughout this entire recording because I love this plant so much. But this little picture here is a perfect example of a lot of different plants all growing in a really tight space, and they all help and grow together. So why do we care about native plants at all? So there's a lot of reasons. For one, the native plants that have grown in a certain area are supporting our local wildlife. So let's use pollinators as an example. A pollinator could be a butterfly, could be a beetle, could be a fly, could be a bee, a wasp, all different things that come into contact with pollen and move them around. That's really what a pollinator is. So let's take the monarch butterfly as an example. Monarch caterpillars can only eat milkweed. You can see in this picture here, the arrow is pointing to some common milkweed that the little girl is gasping about. She actually found a monarch caterpillar, that black, yellow, and white striped caterpillar, on one of those plants in her front yard prairie garden. That insect can only eat leaves from milkweed. So it has a very specialized relationship that it doesn't have with other plants. It can't eat asters, it can't eat goldenrods, it can't eat the leaves of these other things, only milkweeds. Once it goes through metamorphosis, it turns into a chrysalis, then becomes an adult butterfly. You can see the picture of the monarch butterfly up in the left-hand corner there. Then it's able to get nectar from lots of different kinds of plants. So why do we care? If you want to support insect life, then native plants are the powerhouse. That's where it's at. They also act as a huge stormwater absorber. Their roots are all different shapes and sizes. So they can be dense and hairy and fibrous, or they can be long, deep taproots, 10 plus feet down into the ground. That whole matrix of root system acts like a giant sponge, basically, and absorbs rainwater as it's rushing over the surface of the earth. Stops it, traps it, slows it down, allows it to soak into place. Very helpful, especially since we've been having increased storm events, basically over the last 10 plus years. Native plants require very little to none chemical input. So you don't need to fertilize them. You do not need to add anything. You don't need to add, Miracle Grow soil or anything. No amendments need to be added to the soil in order to find a native plant that can flourish there. As opposed to, say, long grass, which is not native to this area, is native somewhere else in the world. And its roots are an inch or so under the ground, okay? And they require a lot of extra fertilizer, sometimes extra water in order to survive and flourish. Native plants, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. It's great. They also provide beauty and life. So in addition to supporting all those different insects, you can see that they provide an opportunity here for these kids to have a science lesson in their front yard plant garden that is beautiful as well. And they're able to see metamorphosis happen right outside their front door. And I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so now that we know why we care, where do you start with starting a native plant garden? Where do you start? And first you need to analyze your site. So what does that mean? That is not as fancy as it sounds. What you want to do is you just want to pay attention to certain areas in your yard and how much light do they get? Are they sunny? Are they getting more than 5 hours of direct sun? Are they shady? Are they getting less than, say, 3 hours of sun? Or are they somewhere in the middle? Are they a part sun category? Just pay attention to that kind of thing. And when I say that, I don't mean in like February or March or something. I'm talking about when all the trees are leafed out, in June, July. Pay attention to the light situation then. What kind of moisture do you have? Now, you don't have to do any fancy tests. We're not doing soil pH, none of that, okay? Really all it means is, do you have a wet yard? Do you have standing water in some areas? When you step on it, is it mushy? Is water literally coming up? Okay, that would be wet. Do you have a dry yard? Is it gravelly? Is it sandy? Does water just soak in immediately? Or are you somewhere in the middle, which is where the majority of people are in Northern Illinois? We're a medium moisture yard. That's just basically normal garden soil. What else do you, location. Where might you want to grow these plants? And I always tell people, put them somewhere where you're going to enjoy them, where you're going to see them, because it's a really neat discovery to watch throughout the whole growing season. I'm a big fan of walking outside my yard with a coffee cup every morning, seeing what's coming up, what bugs are crawling around. It's pretty fun. So I like to have my plants like right near my house where I can interact with them. So look at your locations. Do you want them along a sidewalk? Do you want them along a walkway? Is there an area of your yard that you're like, I never use this? Why do I need to keep it as lawn grass? This is silly. I'm fertilizing this. I'm controlling dandelions. I don't need to do any of that. So look at your yard that way. It's helpful to have an aerial photograph of your yard. And here in McHenry County, we have through the county, we have a GIS program where it's super easy. You can just type your address in and it'll bring up an aerial photograph of your property, and you can overlay different layers of information. That's what GIS is. You can overlay soil type. You can overlay topographic lines. In my resource slide at the very end of this presentation, you'll see the website for that. Okay, so you've figured out location. You've maybe looked at your yard as a whole on an aerial photograph. You also need to think about budget. Now this is really important because with native plants, and I'm going to talk about this more, you need to plan on planting them densely. If you look at all of these pictures on this slide here, you will not see large expanses of open mulch in between individual plants. These plants grow densely, they compete with each other, and that is when they look their most attractive. Therefore, you need to plan on purchasing a lot of plants. I usually recommend 1 per square foot. So let's say you want to create a 10 by 10 foot garden, 100 square feet. And let's say each plant costs $4 a piece. That's $400. Are you prepared to invest that? No? Okay, then go smaller. I don't care if you put 3 little plants in the ground in an existing, garden bed. Just start. So just think about what is your budget going to be. year 1, year 2, that kind of thing. Okay. So you've done some planning, you've kind of figured out where exactly you want your plants to go, and you need to lay out your garden bed if you're creating a new garden bed. I like to lay my garden beds out with a garden hose. It's long, I have one, so it's easy. And it's flexible and can create nice sweeping curves, which look very attractive when you are laying out a garden bed. Straight, 90-degree, harsh angles, they just don't look as attractive. So curved lines are nice. You can also just use that field spray paint. You can use flags, whatever you've got laying around that'll work. Then you need to decide, how am I going to remove or kill my grass? And there's a variety of ways to do that, to prep your site. So you can rent a sod cutter and cut out the top layer of sod. If you do that, you need to think about what you're going to do with that sod to dispose of it. Or you can smother to kill your grass. To do that, ideally, you're going to do it for an entire growing season. You're going to use thick landscape fabric. You're going to use silo plastic, something that you're going to be able to weigh down. Now, ideally, what you're going to do is every like 4 weeks or so, you're going to open that black plastic up, leave it open for like a week, let the weeds underneath it grow, and then just before they go to seed, so maybe after a week or so, whatever, you're going to close it back up, okay? And you're going to repeat that, like, I don't know, every 4 to 6 weeks or something. This is not an exact science, but you're going to let those weeds just keep germinating and then smother them, and then let the next round of weeds germinate, open it up, and then smother them again. I have done all 3 of these methods that you see in the screen there, and I can tell you that I kind of failed at the smothering, but I was really lazy about it and did not do it for a whole growing season, and did not open it up and let the weeds germinate, and we had some wind problems where the plastic was kind of blowing around and stuff. So there's pros and cons to all of these methods. You just have to figure out what's best for you. And then herbiciding and killing your existing vegetation, that is another way to go. This is a very personal choice for people. Some people are okay with it. Some people are just really philosophically opposed to using herbicide, and I completely understand that. If you choose to use herbicide, this is a quick and easy way to kill your existing vegetation. I recommend herbiciding twice in a growing season, say 4 to 8 weeks apart. So let's say once in you know, well, it depends on when you want to plant your garden. But if you wanted to plant your garden at the beginning of June, you could do once at the beginning of May, once towards the end of May, and then plant in the beginning of June. That should be fine. Okay. So you've prepped your site. You figured out how exactly you're going to prep your site. Now you need to think about, what plants are you going to be putting in? And just a few tips here before you start selecting individual plants, because everybody gravitates towards the flowers. And I mean, believe me, I do too. I love colorful flowers as well. But what's really important is when we look to nature, that we see the different layers that are involved. Notice that we've got, in both of these pictures here, one, a woodland picture, and the other just a very short ground layer picture on the right there. Both of them are teeming with dense plants at all different layers. So in the woodland picture there, notice on the very bottom, there's like a layer of, it looks like ferns and other kinds of vegetation, followed by some understory trees, okay, that are maybe 15-ish feet tall, followed by, you know, the tallest level of tree canopy. In that's super important to replicate these layers in your garden. And now it might not be with a 50-foot tall tree, but to replicate this concept of layers, because life exists at every single layer. There's going to be birds that nest in the canopy, birds that utilize these understory trees, and birds that nest on the ground. And there's going to be different insects at every layer as well. The same goes for a tiny little ground layer here, like on the picture on the right. I mean, this is me taking a picture laying on the ground. So this is literally vegetation that's a foot tall, but look at it. It's a little mini woodland in and of itself. When you look at that, it's really interesting. The sedge layer on the ground, those sedge roots are super fibrous. They're really blocking out weeds in an amazing way. So put those things to work for you. And then the mayapple is acting as kind of the canopy layer over that, which is really interesting. And notice the little dead wood in there too. That's really important. All different kinds of insects use dead wood to lay their eggs in, and then their larvae develop inside it and everything else. So when you're designing your garden, whether it's going to be incorporate trees and shrubs or not, even if it's just going to be a little prairie garden, please do not ignore the sedges, the grasses, the low growing flowers that are going to carpet the ground layer of your garden and help set the stage. They're going to outcompete weeds. They're just going to provide support and competition to make everything grow appropriately. Okay, so what I would like to talk about now, this is the fun part, some specific plant examples. This is a really cool Monarch Waystation native plant garden that was designed by Ringer's Landscaping, who is a group out of Fox River Grove, and they designed this specifically for the Barrington Area Conservation Trust, a neighboring land trust to us. And this has some absolutely wonderful examples of plant pairings. And you can see how it's a nice curved kidney-shaped kind of little garden, standalone garden. And the reason it's called a Monarch Waystation is just because it includes some milkweeds, so those caterpillars have food to eat. It includes a variety of nectar sources, so flowers that are going to be blooming from spring, and then different flowers in the summer bloom, and then different flowers in the fall bloom. And what I'm really happy that they incorporated were grasses. So in the very front, you can see they just look like very finely textured fountain grasses. It's labeled as I. That one is prairie dropseed, and personally, I think that grass needs to take over the world. I love it very much. That plant paired with that bright orange flower right on the edge, butterfly milkweed, you put those together, alternating prairie dropseed, butterfly weed, prairie dropseed, butterfly weed. That is going to make a stunning edge for your native plant sun garden. Okay, so these plants are going to need, say, more than 5 hours of sun. They've also incorporated native grasses, little blue stem throughout, which is another one that I just absolutely love. And then they've got all kinds of other little flowers. Something I might add to this is, personally, I might not put the Joe Pye weed in to a small native plant garden. It tends to get pretty aggressive. I might replace that with an aster, like Shorts aster or aromatic aster. The aromatic aster, that can also get pretty aggressive, but personally I love it, and you just have to be committed to ripping 3/4 of it out. You need to be able to edit it every year and just move it to other places in your yard. It's not a big deal. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Shrub, if you wanted to add a shrub to this, a nice low-growing shrub that I would put in would be New Jersey tea. I'll show you some pictures of that later on, but these are all native plants to Northern Illinois and much of the Midwest here. Some other favorite plant combinations for sun include Culvers root and rattlesnake master. So this is in a native plant garden that's in the front yard of a very traditional neighborhood, suburban neighborhood that has a homeowners association. And this garden is just maintained with some very simple principles. The edges are kept neat, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But these plants together, the Culvers root and the rattlesnake master, are stunning together. They're both similar colors, but they have very distinct shapes, and they'll attract, I've seen hummingbirds, all different kinds of wasps, amazing different kinds of insects visiting plants, and just from a design perspective, these two are really, really nice together. Okay, so some favorite plant combinations for shade. Again, a native plant little shade garden right outside a front door. Wild strawberry are the little tiny white flowers that are on the very ground layer. Wild strawberry, I can't say enough about this plant as a ground cover. You can walk on it, it can do sun, it can do shade. It spreads vigorously by runners. If you don't like where it's growing, you rip it out, pretty simple. And it's pretty, and yes, you will actually get little strawberries. The bluish purple low growing flowers are Jacob's ladder, supports all different kinds of little native bees. And then towards the back, we have wild ginger, and I'm going to show you some up close pictures of a few of these. The wild ginger up in the upper right there, that is also, you can see there's some wild strawberry, those little white flowers, and the purple is common violet. Fantastic ground cover. Can't say enough about the density of this plant. That's what you want in a ground cover. You want something that's going to grow dense and is really going to outcompete weeds. It does not keep other wildflowers from being able to grow up and in between it. They do just fine. The center picture, that's what wild strawberry looks like in the fall. Absolutely gorgeous. It turns that red color, especially where it gets enough sun. So that particular walkway, you can see that that person really just doesn't let the runners go out onto the walkway, and that's how it's maintained. This wild strawberry will grow towards the sun. So if you plant it in a shady area, the runners are going to move towards the sun. So use that to your advantage when planting it. And then the bottom right picture, Pennsylvania sedge. Oh my gosh. Okay. So tiny, under 1 foot fountains of beautiful, finely textured blades. It's not a grass, it's a sedge, whatever, it looks like a fancy grass, but man, the root structure on these plants is so fibrous and will act as an erosion control like crazy. So you've got a hillside, man, put a sedge in. There's just so many different kinds of sedges or carex. So those can do sun, they can do shade, they can do everything in between. They're not going to be happy in standing water, so in an extremely moist situation. Other than that, they're really versatile. And then, okay, this isn't a ground cover, but that little flowering white shrub next to the Pennsylvania sedge, that's the New Jersey tea that I had referenced earlier. That shrub can be kind of fussy. Rabbits like to eat it. It likes to die back and maybe like only sprout a little bit one year and then the next year sprout more. So just, you got to decide if you're okay with that or not. If you put New Jersey tea in, I've got them all over the place. A bunch of them have been eaten by rabbits. A bunch of them look beautiful. I'm doing an experiment with them where I'm planting sedges around them to see if that deters rabbits from eating them. The kind of sharp edges of the sedge blades. Who knows? We'll see if it works. Okay, so you have all of your plants. Oh wait, no, we haven't talked about that. Where do you buy these plants? So local native plant sales are going to be your best places to get these plants. Could be your local land trust, could be your local native plant group. Here in McHenry County, we do a native plant sale in the spring and the fall. So does the WPPC. I have some resources at the end of places where you can buy native plants in McHenry County, Illinois. Your local Wild Ones group here in the Midwest, we have some Wild Ones groups. They usually do native plant sales. And you know, there's actually some local nurseries who are starting, traditional nurseries that are carrying more and more native plants as consumer demand grows. So keep asking for them at your traditional local nurseries. So those are all places where you can get them. I've got the resources at the end. Okay, so there's mail order places too as well. That's a good option if you go through a reputable nursery, which I have a few linked at the end. Okay, so you've got the plants and they're, you know, all in those little tiny pots. What do you do with them, right? You've got them. So I am kind of OCD sometimes, and I love graph paper, and I love to graph out and just kind of design out my native plant gardens. And, you know, each little square is 1 square foot or whatever you want to do it. And usually what ends up happening when it comes time to laying the plants out is that my graph paper is like wet and has blown away somewhere. So, or I just don't end up following it exactly. Just follow the simple principles of shorter plants in the front, taller plants in the center or in the very back if you've got a wall or a foundation or something behind you. I think a key to making an attractive planting, whether it's native or not, is to have these finely textured grasses and sedges in the front with the flowers interspersed in between them. So like we talked about earlier, that prairie drop seed and butterfly weed combination, just absolutely gorgeous. Group together, plant them in groups of 3s, 5s, 7s. Apparently in the design world that looks nicer. I do agree that that looks nice. When they're grouped together, you can also plant masses if you prefer, of like a bunch of butterfly weed all together or a bunch of pale purple coneflower. That makes it efficient for pollinators as well when they're foraging and looking for pollen or nectar. So when it comes time to actually plant the native plants in your prepared bed, that little tool down there in the bottom left corner with the orange handle, it's called a soil knife. That's my favorite thing to use. It is marked with inch increments on it. And that's really nice. So the whole soil knife is usually like a foot long. So if you're spacing everything a foot apart, perfect. You got your soil knife right there. It can also help remove the plant from the little plastic pot. You can use it to just dig your very minimal hole to be able to put the plants in. And it's got an orange handle, so it's not super easy to lose it in your garden. That orange handle has saved me many times. And I know this picture shows wood mulch personally, and some other people that I know in the native plant world were big advocates for leaf mulch, if you have it. So putting that down in and amongst your native plants, that's going to provide a much better organic matter for the soil, and help hold moisture into, and it's just going to be a better compost basically for your soil as opposed to wood mulch. Plus it's just cheaper, so that's nice. All right, so we would be remiss if we did not talk about maintenance, because people have this impression that a native plant garden is very low maintenance. And I'm here to tell you that that's just not true. It does get less as the years go on, but the first few years when those plants are little, it's really important to keep weed competition down. For one thing, it's going to make your garden look nicer. And for another thing, it's going to promote, your little native plants to actually survive. Few tips on how to weed your garden. I'm a big proponent of using a hoe. This particular one here that's pictured, well, there's two. The tall one, that's a Dutch hoe. That's one that I personally use. It doesn't have to be that one. I mean, any hoe with there's some people that like the diamond shaped hose better, like whatever works for you. The reason that we like to use a hoe is we need to minimize soil disturbance. So when you are pulling a dandelion, say, out of the ground, and you're like, get those roots and all out of there, do that, and then look at the soil disturbance that you've just created. And what's happened is you then have unearthed all kinds of other weed seeds that are laying dormant in the soil. They are now exposed to air and light and moisture, and they're going to have a party, and they're going to grow like crazy. So a hoe cuts that plant off right at the surface with very minimal soil disturbance. So whether you use a stand-up Dutch hoe, which is really nice for people who especially can't get down on their hands and knees. I bought that tool for my mom one year after she had hip surgery, because it's hard for people sometimes to be able to get up and down, and that is a tool you can use standing up, and it's really effective. If you are able to get down on your hands and knees, the little small handheld hoe down in the corner there, that thing's like $8 or something on Amazon, and you can find them anywhere. I'm pretty obsessed with that tool. I use that tool constantly. Every time I'm out in my gardens, when I'm down kneeling, I use that for really fine, getting in between little plants, and I just kind of use like a corner and just kind of grub them out, creating very minimal soil disturbance. So I'm a big proponent of that. This is a technique that I learned from a friend who's a horticulturalist here in the county, as well as this really cool book called Garden Revolution by Larry Weiner. Excellent book. Anyway, he's a big proponent of that method as well. And it's amazing. You're able to weed things so quickly. And no, it's not killing the weed, but you're starving it. So you've got to do it consistently. So instead of being down on your hands and knees, pulling that weed out by the roots, you're going through and you're finishing an area in like 5 minutes with really minimal wear on your body. So you do that once a week and it's not a big deal at all. All right, some other maintenance tips to make a native plant garden look nice is just maintain a neat edge. Whatever that means for you, whether it's just mowing the edge, whether it's spading the edge and literally cutting an edge out. Just maintain that if that's what you're going to do. Or whether it's a physical structure, pavers, whatever, you know, flagstone, railroad timbers, whatever you're going to put in there, an intentional edge makes it look cared for. Okay? Don't let plants flop all over the place on your sidewalk. It drives me crazy in my own, you know, garden along my front sidewalk. Sometimes you've got to be able to remove plants. There's no getting around it. Otherwise, these native plants are they're going to spread. I mean, that's like what plants' whole goal is, basically. So don't be afraid to edit. Don't be afraid to remove plants. Rip them out. Put them somewhere else in your yard. Give them to a neighbor. I mean, spread the word, right? So maintain a neat edge. Don't let plants flop. And then a couple pollinator-friendly tips. Over the fall and winter, leave your leaves in the garden bed. Free fertilizer, mulch, organic material for your garden right there. And there's tons of little caterpillars and all kinds of things that are going to overwinter in those leaves. Don't disturb them, leave them there. Awesome, less work. Your cut plant stems. So in the spring, everybody starts freaking out about the way that the dead plant stems look. And I understand. So what you can do is if you have to cut them down, leave 15 inches of standing stem there. And there's little native bees and critters that are going to be inside those little stems and be able to either overwinter inside that or potentially have eggs inside there. It all depends on what exactly the insect is. Pretty simple. Cut everything to at least 15 inches and you're fine. Okay, so how can you learn more? Here in Northern Illinois, there was a program called Conservation at Home that was started by the Conservation Foundation, who is a Northern Illinois land trust as well. And basically, it is a program that just gives some suggestions to homeowners on some things that you can choose to do in your yard that are just going to make your yard more ecologically friendly. And they're very simple things. Put some native plants in, take some non-native invasive things out. And that's really what it comes down to, because when you start doing that, you're going to use less chemicals, you're going to use less fertilizer, you're going to use less water. So just some simple ideas of things you can do. Depending on what county you live in, there are going to be land trusts in Northern Illinois and even Southern Wisconsin now, and I think other areas in the Midwest too, that are implementing this program. If you're here in McHenry County, you can contact me. My email is down at the bottom there. Or you can just go to conservancy.org to learn more about the program. It's also a program called Conservation at Work, and that's what this picture is showing here. That is the McHenry County Administration Building, and they in Woodstock, Illinois, and they have some beautiful examples of native plant gardens all around the outside of their property. So they were awarded the Conservation at Work certification and sign, which is really cool. Conservation at Home includes a yard sign too, if you meet some of those items on that checklist. It's a great way to talk to your neighbors, your friends, about what these things are. What are these plants and why have you put them in? And, you know, here, do you want some? So it's a good conversation starter as well. So resources, these are just a few, but these are some of the resources that I commonly share with people on where to buy native plants if you happen to be in McHenry County. If you need to mail order plants, if you have no local things near you that you're able to get them from, there's some mail order options with a lot of native plants that are native to the Midwest. I really like Prairie Moon Nursery's website. It's very user-friendly and it's very educational. So just go to prairiemoon.com, type in a plant like butterfly weed, and it's going to bring it up, and you can click on the range map to get the native range of that plant down to the county level, which is really cool. And I love that feature. So some favorite books, Heather Holm, she's amazing. I use those books all the time, and Doug Talamis too. All of these are must reads for people to learn more. Heather Holm's books, actually, that Pollinators of Native Plants, it actually includes little garden designs too, which is really a great feature, and I like that a lot. And it's garden designs for all different situations, shade, sun, parkways, all kinds of things. And then earlier I mentioned that it's a really great idea to have an aerial photograph of your property to help you develop a plan here in McHenry County. That's the website, mchenrycountygis.org/Athena, where you can download an aerial photograph of your property, and then some other good resources too on Facebook and other things. If anybody has any questions, just reach out, just email me. I'm happy to, help point you in the right direction. Our Conservation at Home program does include site visits when that is appropriate, or we can also do phone consults. So our goal with the Land Conservancy and any land trust is to support private homeowners in implementing these practices on their property in a way that is appropriate for them and that makes them happy. So don't hesitate to reach out and check out our website. Other than that, that's what I have for you today. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.